What's up, guys? Welcome back to our podcast we got going on here with Pastor Lee. We got Let's Talk About It. What do we talk about this week, Lee?
We are talking about the things that we don't usually talk about. So what are some of those subjects, some of those topics that are kind of, you feel like are taboo or that people don't want to talk about? Yeah.
Yeah. Those weird, maybe awkward, hard situations or things you don't usually talk about with other people, parents, your friends, whoever it is.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, we've been sitting here trying to make sure all the technical stuff is there, but wanna say hey to everybody that's in the room right now. And so I want us to think about what are some of those things. Like when you think about it, we've been talking about a lot of stuff so far. We've talked about parties. We've talked about relationships. We've talked about drama. We've talked about lots of different things, but we started to realize there's some things in life that we just don't talk about, So whether or not that's with families or friends or people at the table, things like that, what are some things that come to mind when you think of the things that people just don't talk about?
Well, like sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Okay. So, I can see that. Well, okay, so even with your friends, y'all don't talk about that stuff?
That is not true.
Well, I guess it depends too, though. Like we'll have that tight knit group that we will talk about, like maybe those harder to talk about topics. But I guess you don't talk about it with everyone, type deal.
Yeah.
But I guess those conversations aren't really meant to be talked about with everyone, though, too, or are they? I really don't know.
I think in the same sense, though, people make fun of those situations too.
Yeah,
there's a lot more. It's more of a joke than it is a serious talk. Whenever you talk about that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. We got Nate Miller. We got Anna coming in here. So you think it's more of a joke to talk about sex, drugs, rock and roll, that kind of thing? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think maybe it's because maybe it's necessarily you don't always want to have to be serious. When you're talking about a lot of life stuff, you kind of want to make a joke about it so it doesn't seem so bad.
Yeah, I feel that. What about you? Why do you think?
I feel like it's like the culture we're like growing up in, and like that's all we've known, so it's all we're gonna continue to do, type deal. It's hard to rock off that path that we're kind of on when we're already on the tracks, we're already on the railroad tracks. It's hard to get knocked off.
Gotcha.
And to go to that new path where like we open up more, I guess, to those ideas
and talk more seriously about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So guys, we're talking about the things that we don't talk about. So what are some of those topics, whether or not it's with your friends, whether or not it's with family, that you just don't open up about, talk about, maybe things you think about, but you don't really do. These guys mentioned the first ones was sex, drugs, rock and roll. Let's go. Think about those topics. Let's go sex and drugs, right? Everybody talk about rock and roll, but sex and drugs, like, why do you think, like, particularly with maybe let's not say your friends, maybe not the people you joke about, but people you'd have honest, real conversations with, why do you not talk about sex or drugs with those people?
It's almost awkward, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
With, I guess, our society in America, it's awkward to talk about sex with other people.
Yeah?
It's not that topic you just want to go around, I guess, sharing everything about.
Yeah. I think a lot of it can be personal, too.
Okay,
like you don't want to share a lot of that personal stuff to people you don't really know, or people you're not like 100% about.
We're very entitled to like our privacy.
Yeah.
Like, I guess. What I've heard though is like over in Europe though is like their parents will be like in the shower or whatever, and they can just walk right in there and talk to their parents. Like,
I feel like that's not true.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I don't know if we could ever do that though.
Running list. What do you mean ever do?
Mama Keel says depression, suicide, addiction, sex. ...
Okay. This is good. Depression, mental health. Depression, suicide. Bogey's in here. I see Ali Shimchak. Crystal's in here, said it's tough to have your sin exposed. Okay, so but I'm not necessarily thinking about sin either. I'm just thinking about like topics that we won't talk about, even if it was distant from us. You know what I mean? So I'm not talking about confession. I'm not talking about like, hey, tell me everything you've ever experienced with this or whatever, but just like the idea of it. But like that's the thing. So we see depression, we see suicide, We got these things going for us. Why do you feel like those are topics you don't touch? You know what I mean?
It's so hard just because like it is the topics we don't really talk about, so it's hard to bring topics up around it because we've never talked about that type of stuff before.
Yeah, but like when you think about the idea of talking about depression or suicide, or because I think, well, that's funny actually you mentioned drugs, because like when we talked about drugs here at Crew, I felt like people were very open to talking about everything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem like people were upset about anything. So I'm sitting here wondering then, what about stuff like mental health? Like, why do we not talk about suicide? Why do we not talk about depression?
It's a big topic, I guess. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know, for me at least, I don't know if I always want to have that conversation like right away or something like that. And like I don't know. Those are just hard topics to talk about. Just like not necessarily like one-on-one, but even in like a group setting. I feel like it's almost worse to talk about in a group setting, because you have multiple people around you that, you don't know their stories or whatever. Or even if you do, you kind of have to balance what's going on there.
Yeah. Okay. This is good. So like, I think this is touching on something, of there's something involved when you talk about things that, you're thinking about the other person, and you're thinking about what are they bringing with them. Okay. So like I started thinking about some of these topics, and this board is just up here for like throwing all the ideas so we keep track of them. It's trying to just help us to have this conversation. But I think this is getting somewhere, right? What up, Bogey? And Jennifer, thank you for more suggestions on that one. But like we're afraid of certain topics like sex or drugs or depression or suicide or even abuse, because what has their experience been with this? So I might be able to say something and might say my opinion, but someone else might have an experience with this that all of a sudden makes it like a really hard, like, well, okay, I'll lay it there. Someone else in your mind, you say they have an experience. What's the emotion or what's the feeling when you step into that?
People almost feel triggered, almost like you're almost making fun of them if you're saying what your views are on it, type deal. Like, I guess because we feel that all people's views are different, and like we don't want to offend anyone. Type, I guess, because what we see a lot today is a victim card being played.
Yeah. Okay, the victim card. But so name that emotion though. What's the emotion? You're there. This is dudes trying to talk about emotion. We're really fun.
B.
Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you happy?
I'm happy.
You're happy?
No, I'm not happy.
Wait, so what was the question? I'm a little confused.
What emotion, like when you think about having these tough conversations or like these topics that we don't talk about and someone else might have this experience, like what's the emotion running through your body thinking, someone just brought up suicide?
Awkwardness or potentially like, I don't know.
You feel really uncomfortable.
I can't think of the word that I'm trying to.
You're almost sympathetic, I guess. I don't know what you'd say that, but like.
Crystal's already kind of said it in the chat. You're afraid.
Yeah.
Like there's fear. Like you're worried. Like what if I say something that's going to offend someone else? What if I say something that's going to bring something else about somebody else? I think like, we've ID'd some really tough topics to start with, I guess that's not necessarily the direction I thought it was going to go. Cause like, what are the other like basic things that you don't talk about? Like just the rule of thumb. Like we have this list of sex, drugs, depression, suicide, abuse. Those are all pretty serious things. What are some other things that are pretty light that we also just don't talk about?
Religion.
We don't talk about Jesus. We don't talk about religion. We're afraid to talk about religion, but it ties back to this piece that we were saying. Why? Because of the other person's perspective. Like we're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
We're afraid of what their perspective is going to be. What if we hurt their feelings? What if they have a bad experience in their past? Things like that. What's another innocent one? Religion go hand in hand. Topics you don't talk about at Thanksgiving.
Politics.
Politics. Yeah, religion, politics. I'm gonna write both of those on you.
Thanksgiving. I knew it.
So again, why do you not talk about those things?
Because you don't want to have to get in those conversations, like especially politics, man. Woo.
It's the red zone.
Yeah, you never know what somebody's gonna say, and you never know what kind of argument you're gonna start, especially with that topic, because nobody. I mean, unless you're very open about your political views, that's one of those things where it's like, unless you like really want to get into an argument with somebody, or you really think that they like agree with you, then that's one of those things where it's like maybe we shouldn't get into that situation.
So that's the question then is, do we feel like all of these things on this list, are they all things that we're going to get in an argument about, So like any of these things, is that what we're afraid of? Is somehow the hurt feelings or the argument or the fear? It's all about something to do with that other person, which is kind of fascinating.
Yep.
I mean, what do you think? I mean, is that what it is? Is that the thing that's tying it all together? I mean, when I think about sex, I'm not going to talk about sex because I don't know if I would throw argument on all these things, but maybe, mental health, things like that, suicide.
I feel like we've put ourselves into a bubble.
I like what Corey had to say. Corey said the fear of confrontation.
Yeah.
That is true. Because, I feel like that can go hand in hand, though.
So okay, all right. When I think about these things we don't talk about, religion, politics, things like that, why do we assume there's going to be a confrontation?
Because there always is.
How do you know if we never talk about it?
Because the majority of the time I don't know, in like a social situation, whenever we see it like through like media or whatever, there's always some type of argument or something. Like especially if you watch TV or something and you see all the political shows in the morning and you just watch how they go at each other. That kind of puts a blanket on the whole conversation.
I like this. Yeah. No, that's an interesting piece that I hadn't really thought about, was that somehow the media, right, tells us that this is a hot button thing, and if you talk to someone, they're going to yell at you about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with religion. So, because it really was a curious thing of, well, it always happens that way. We always end up in confrontation. But when you think about it, though, if you've never had those conversations, if you never talked about religion, or if you never talked about politics, or if you've never talked about sex or drugs or mental health, then how do you know in real life if that's going to be that way?
Yeah, like trying it out yourself first before you just see what they put out there on the internet and what's on social media. Because for sure we see it on we see it on our phones, we see it on the TV, we see it everywhere. It's just you're turning your head one way and you're seeing it, and then you turn your head the other way and you're still seeing it.
But would you say in real life you ever see it?
That's the thing, is we don't ever really see it in real life because no one's actually like attempting that confrontation.
Yeah, because there's this fear of the unknown almost in real life. So for those that have just joined in, I see Uma's joined in. I see Lexi's joined in for us. We've been talking about the things that we don't talk about. And we made this list about things that we don't talk about. I'm not looking at the list, but like sex, drugs, addiction is something we don't talk about. I would say, what else is on here? Politics, religion, depression, abuse, mental health, suicide, all things we don't talk about. But the other thing we've been trying to do is identify kind of the reasons why we don't talk about it. And the big thing that we've kind of come up with there is that we're worried about the other person's background. So like maybe we're worried about offending, but really the big thing is confrontation. And what we kind of identified was that the reason why we're afraid or we assume confrontation is going to happen, even though we've never had these conversations in real life, is because they've been modeled for us in media. Like, so media tells us if you talk about these things, that's what's going to happen. Even we brought up the Thanksgiving thing. I remember an SNL sketch. Did you see this with Adele?
Yes.
Yeah. The Adele, if y'all haven't seen it, go SNL Adele. There's a number of them, but Adele Thanksgiving. And so every time there was almost an argument, someone starts playing Adele, so the whole family gets back together and starts singing it, So it's just kind of funny because even something like that makes us just assume confrontation's bound to happen if we talk about any of these things.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had that kind of situation with somebody like here at least, where you've made that assumption about having a confrontation with them?
What do you mean, like here at church?
Yeah.
I made that assumption there's gonna be a confrontation.
Yeah.
I'm one of those like I'm I don't want to say I'm a fan of conflict. I've met people that are fans of conflict before, but like I'm open to it. Like I'm welcoming to it. I think we grow more and we learn more when there is kind of that tension in the room. But at the same time, that tension's got to be respect. There's got to be respect within that tension. Otherwise, we can't have a real conversation. And I've been told I have yeah, I had too much patience. So I've been told that before. I look at Clayton when I think of that. But like,
Why do you look at me for that?
because you can test that patience sometimes, Clayton. But like the idea is like yeah. So I have a whole lot of patience for someone, and as long as we can get onto a respectful plane, I'll talk about it. No doubt about it. Looks like we got some comments coming in. I think it's a sensitive subject, and people are afraid to talk about it because maybe they've dealt with some of those topics personally. Definitely, it's hard not to offend someone else these days, also. But do you think that's true? Like when you think about school, when you think about your classroom, when you think about your household, your family, do you think it's easy to offend someone there? Like, have y'all experienced that in the classroom? Because like I think for us at church, you asked me like how we experience it here. I think if someone's going to ask the question, it really depends on how you respond. So a lot of times it's funny because we're so obsessed with the right answer. And so we'll actually jump to some sort of assumption about what they want to hear from us. But the reality is they want a conversation and they want someone to engage it. And so I think we talked about this before. A lot of times I'm gonna ask questions before I answer them. You know, so you might ask me a question, but then I'm gonna answer him. Uma says he agrees. Uma, tell me what you agree about, man. What part of it? And then you guys, how do you feel about that?
Well, you're always saying, "Why do you want to know?" If someone asks you something, you say, "Why do you want to know?" First thing.
Oh yeah. But that's the thing, and Uma, I love you, man. We've had some fun. I've gotten to witness him have some tough conversations with students before too, and it's that level of just welcoming the conversation, not being afraid of the topic, whatever it might be, because we got to talk about some of this stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know, especially religion, right? That's one on the heart for me. Like, why are we so afraid to talk about Jesus when all of the research tells us, and when I say research, I'm talking about like polls, things like that. Barna is a big group that does a lot of this, tells us that 4 out of 10 people would be willing to come to church if someone just asked them. But like, we're afraid. We're terrified. What if that's offensive? What if they blah, blah, blah? What if they have background? Like, and I'm kind of like, yeah, what if? Actually, I think it's even more than 4 out of 10 lately. I think it's actually like 6 out of 10 that don't go to church would actually be welcome to coming if someone asked them.
Do you think it's what was the word? I just had it. I'm frustrated now because I don't remember what it was. Shallowness. Do you think it's just shallowness between people?
Probably. And where do we get that from?
Social media?
Social media.
What?
In the house again. Yeah. Social media is sitting here telling us that we have to be fake, that we have to be shallow, that you're not allowed to be real. And even when you do try and be real, it's not genuine and real almost, because real stuff happens in community and around people, and those real conversations do too. And guys, part of the reason why, again, we're talking about some of these topics, sex, drugs, rock and roll addiction, abuse, suicide, politics,
rock and roll,
religion, right? Did I put rock and roll up there? But some of the reasons why is because I think we have an opportunity, especially if we're doing this live stream, to talk about some of these things moving forward, and to be able to do it with kind of this respectful thing and model what it means to have a conversation. And these are the fears why we don't talk. Because of other people's backgrounds. What are they bringing to the table? We're afraid of confrontation, and we're afraid of offending people. You know what I mean?
What else do you think it could be, though?
As far as why we don't talk about it?
Yeah.
I think those are the biggest things. I think we're afraid to offend, and we're afraid to confront. We don't like conflict. You know, it's funny. Like, think about it. Like in a school world, like how many parents are a little upset when little Timmy like gets his feelings hurt. You know, because that's conflict. Like Timmy got his feelings hurt when you told him he didn't pass his math test. Well, friend, I'm not in control of Timmy's feelings, and I'm also not in control of whether or not Timmy's going to pass this math test.
Amen.
You know? So like the struggle needs to be real. It needs to be honest.
We all have that choice.
Yeah. And we're all going to have feelings, and we're afraid of feelings. I think that's a piece of it too. We're afraid of real feelings.
Mm-hmm. But we're all given the choice. It's not like it's not there in front of us.
Right.
What up, Justin Martinez? Great to have you in here, man. Corey says, maybe afraid of not having all the knowledge to defend our faith. So one of the reasons why we don't want to talk about it, we're afraid of not having all the right answers.
I could understand that.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone? What would you say to someone who's afraid of not having all the right answers when it comes to something of faith?
Shoot your shot.
Yeah,
See what you got.
You don't always have to have the right answers. Just make sure that what you're talking about is, not necessarily what you know, but like that's what you're going to stick to. And don't just change your mind just because somebody else said it.
Yeah, and again, I think the other piece is, like, it's funny. I just actually came off of a conversation. I had a high schooler who's just, hey, I don't really believe anything, but I have questions. I was like, great, let's talk. And they're like, yeah, I'm not really into an argument. I don't need this. I was like, great, that's awesome. I'm not either. I don't want to have an argument. I'm going to share with you what I believe. And if there's something that's challenging to that, like, I'll say, like, oh, that's really challenging. Thank you for that. You know what I mean? Because none of us have all the right answers. None of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're not God. We don't have every single answer. And so the thing is being able to have the conversation. I see another comment. We're also afraid of what others will think of us. We want to protect our own reputations. Definitely see that too. When it comes to this too, I think there's a piece of it of not the whole not having the right answer thing. Like it also starts to make people into projects rather than people. You know what I mean? And I think that's a key piece.
We're like afraid of getting corrected. Like we think that if we don't know it, then we're lesser or something in that sort.
Sure.
We're like lesser of, I guess, I don't know. I wouldn't say people, but I would say like lesser in our knowledge. And I guess that makes us weak, and we don't like to be weak.
Yeah.
Sure. So using like the religion example, if someone were to quote a Bible verse that you weren't super familiar with, and you're like, I don't know what they're talking about, like you'd feel weak, you'd feel inferior.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because this is the stuff that's modeled to us. Like, oh man, you're getting me on something now. Speaking of politics, I couldn't stand it.
Politics.
Oh.
I couldn't stand like some of these presidential or vice presidential debates that we've seen, let's go 4 years ago, 8 years ago, because of like how many times people laughed, or like candidates laughed or made fun of people or blah, blah, blah. Like I'm sitting there thinking all these kids are watching this thinking this is how adults communicate. And so like, again, if you don't know a Bible verse, instead of being like, oh no, that's fine. Like go and research it and let me know what you think. People are like, oh, you don't know that Bible verse, but you're going to stand up for blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's not a healthy conversation. That's not real.
Oh no.
What's up?
Is yours down?
No. Mine's up.
It's just yours.
Mine. Okay.
Yeah, just close out of it.
All right.
You guys have any thoughts out there with some of this stuff? Any of this stuff resonating? So we're worried about our own reputations. We're worried about making other people mad. We're worried about confronting people, fear of offending them, and what's on your brain?
I don't think it's necessarily wrong to be afraid of offending people, especially with the way our culture is now. You never know how somebody's going to react to something. You know, you might offend somebody, they might pull a gun out and shoot you.
Okay, but like,
way to take it to the extreme there.
I mean, like,
it's true.
You never know how safe you can be in a situation.
Yeah, but think about when I'm saying these topics that we've come up with. Yeah, rejection. That's a good one. That's a good one, Corey. Fear of rejection.
Bryce Corsten. Hi, Bryce.
Fear of rejection's in here too. So like we don't want to have these conversations, but for the most part, the people you're talking to are not. I mean, we don't talk about these things with our close friends. Like we don't talk about these things with our family sometimes. So when it comes to offending, like they're not going to pull a gun on you. You know what I mean?
Maybe not.
No way. There's no way.
You've never met my family.
Nah.
Bro, but for real, now you're going to make people think they can't talk about these things.
But Meryl come out glocking, you know what I'm saying?
Is that what it is? Little Meryl's going to come and shoot you
Little
when
Meryl.
you start bringing up. I don't think your family is going to pull a gun on you for talking about politics
We got Lee thinking now.
or religion or all these things. Guys that have just joined up with us, we're talking about the things we don't talk about in preparation for hopefully in the next few weeks kind of talking about some of these things we don't talk about. We talked about the reasons why we don't talk about them, some examples of the things that we don't talk about. We don't really talk about sex. We don't talk about mental health. We don't talk about drugs. We don't talk about
Rock and roll.
abuse. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. And all because we're afraid of
Rock and roll.
Of others' backgrounds and experiences that they're bringing to the table. All because of fearing of rejection from them, fear of confrontation, all this stuff. But here's the question. And this might be a question for us to kind of close out too, if we're thinking about it. When is the conversation worth it?
I guess, I don't know. Like, at what point
What up, Jeremy Nero?
it's just not worth it? It's just not worth having the conversation at all? Is that what you're trying to
No,
say?
I'm saying at what point do you say, actually, all that stuff goes out the window? I need to have this conversation.
Oh, like if your fears are all that you just need to talk to someone?
No, I'm saying, I'm
You're
saying
confusing me.
these topics that are on the table, sex, drugs, emotional health, religion, politics, these ones we don't ever want to do because we're afraid of all these things. When do all these things go out the window because that conversation needs to happen?
Well, there's one of two answers. I can give you the good one and the bad one. The bad one is go talk to somebody when you need help.
Okay.
And the good one is you should be talking about it when you're at your best point so that you know what to do when it happens.
But there's never the talk in the middle of the road.
But I mean I guess, but that could be considered your best point too. Not necessarily, not necessarily that it's like your best moment, but like when you're in a better spot than you are at rock bottom,
The best opportunity you have between the point that you're at and the point of it's over
Yeah.
type deal. That is your best moment at that time.
I like Jeremy. Jeremy says always, like at any time, because that's the thing is if we can't communicate, what are we doing? I mean, that's where
We're
I
not
last.
living.
Like seriously, we're faking it. We're
TikTok, baby.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Like that's why we're here. Like let's talk about these things and let's do it in a respectful way. Let's do it where there's challenging ideas brought to the table. Let's do it because otherwise, I mean, think about it. So let's think about some of these things. If you're never talking about this with real people, where are you getting your opinions about these things?
I guess your superiors in your life almost.
But if we're
But
not
if you're
talking about
to
it,
people.
Yeah, but if you're not talking about it, like where your views are and all that stuff,
yeah.
your phone, social media.
You're
For
getting on your
sure.
phone. What does YouTube have to say about this? What's TikTok telling me about this? What's Instagram doing? What's Twitter telling me? What's all this? And I don't know. I mean, I would say those are not the healthiest like places to get most of your stuff from.
Really?
I mean,
No, yeah, 100%. They're definitely not like the safest or the best for you at all. It gets toxic.
yeah. Well, speaking of which, like, have y'all looked into like we're just going to politics? We're gonna talk about politics one of these times. It's gonna be really fun.
Just one
Oh, Lord.
politics.
Just one. Yeah. Well, maybe one later on. We'll see.
Yeah.
But like, talk about all the stuff we've learned about like how Facebook will target posts and will filter out posts and put in posts that they want you to see, so they make you think this way that everybody's voting. Like YouTube, social media, Facebook, Twitter, they're all trying to get you to think a certain way. Like they're all lying to you. I mean, not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
They're
so.
publicizing.
Yeah, it's all what's the word? Propaganda.
Yeah.
Like it's all its own way of propaganda. Propaganda 2020. Like trying to figure out how to make you think. And YouTube's the same way. Like it can all of a sudden strategize to put all this stuff in front of you. And I'm not trying to get like conspiracy theory on us or anything, but like yeah, it's kind of
Yeah, he
fascinating.
is.
Oh, he's conspiracy. What's your conspiracy theory?
No, that's what I'm saying. That is this conspiracy
Yeah.
theory is that like social media, YouTube is all targeting Amazon. Everything is targeting us to do what they want to do. I mean your phone. Like talk about the greatest salespeople of all times. Like they've gotten you addicted. They've gotten every one of us addicted to our phones. So we're gonna use their product as often as we can. We're gonna be consumed by it. And we're gonna be robots to it.
Oh.
Like, hey, congrats, you did it. You know. Bella, nice of you to join us. Jeremy said, "Yay, politics." Yes, we will get into. We'll just talk about it, like why, and especially why we don't talk about it. Peace.
Let's talk about it.
But that's kind of where we're at. I mean, do you guys are we wrapping? What are we doing?
Yeah, kind of wrapping.
Kind of wrapping it up. So what we've been talking about. I mean, things we don't talk about.
Broad.
Very broad stuff we don't talk about. But then why don't we talk about it? And the main thing is fear of conflict, fear of confrontation, fear of blah 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 blah. There's something to that. I think there's something that's going to be at the heart of that.
The whole fear part.
Yeah. What's at the heart of that?
The devil.
And I don't know if I'm going way too up here on this, but like,
I think you are.
No, I don't. I think you're onto something.
I'm confused about point of return.
Self-perception, self-worth.
It's all coming down to, do you fear God or not? How is your relationship with Him first before you think about these things, and you help? He's the one that's going to help you with those other relationships.
Yeah. But it all goes back to the value conversation. Like, where does your value come from, right? And so that connects. Like, your value comes from God. That's exactly what Clayton's saying. But if you all of a sudden feel like, if I have this tough conversation, my value goes down, because what if they're offended? What if they don't like me? What if they destroy my reputation? Who cares? You know, who ultimately cares? As long as you're being a respectful person, you're being loving in what you're saying, and you're having just a decent conversation, treating them like they're a decent human being, your value is intact. It's not taken away because someone's offended or someone had feelings about what you said. Again, as long as you're being respectful and considerate in how you approach a tough topic. But if we don't talk about it, then that's an issue. You have a thought. I can see it in your face.
I don't.
So that's where we're kind of at. It kind of comes down to that. Do you know where your value's at? I mean, seriously, are you comfortable enough with who you are and what you think, and humble enough to admit what you don't know in a conversation too, and admit that I'm actually not familiar with that. No, thanks for bringing that up. That's something I want to look further into. You know, and do you know how to have an honest conversation? Do you know how to talk about it?
Communication.
And communicate. Yeah. I mean, so this is the reason why we don't talk about it, because we're somehow afraid of what people are going to think about us, or if they're going to think that's a smart answer or a dumb answer, or all these different things. And then ultimately we took it into another level too. What was that final level we went to?
Self-confidence.
The self-confidence. But there's something else. There was like, why don't we talk about it? And then,
how do we talk about it?
Nicole Shimchek. Hello. Nice to see you. I don't know. All right. What do we not talk about? Why do we not talk about it?
I'm blanking now.
Blanking now. Apparently that means it's probably
bro.
close to time.
Oh, Lord. What is it?
There's a deeper level that we went to.
Right.
Sophia, great of you to join us as well. But hopefully that's kind of where we're at when we think about these things.
Why did you giggle?
Because Allie and Nicole are saying hey back and forth to each other, and hey. So hey, thanks for joining in, guys. But that's kind of the idea behind what we did tonight, was what are the things we don't talk about? Why don't we talk about them? And the need to just have an honest, real conversation, because that's what it was. That's where we went. Hey, we didn't lose it. Was because
how do you get it back?
If we don't talk about these things, where are we going to get our information from? And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, where are we going to get our information from?
From the box in the back of the woods that I'd buried 3 feet under.
Clayton, that's really strange, man. So, like, if we don't talk about it, we're going to get this information from places that are already trying to brainwash us anyway. So let's have real conversations about these things, especially, let's say, hey, what were the top topics you think? Let us know at some point this week. What were the big ones? I mean, we heard politics. We heard religion. We heard sex. Maybe we'll talk about that one. Drugs. We kind of talked about drugs. We talked about partying.
Rock and roll.
Mental health is definitely a big one to talk about.
I think it's something we can talk about.
Abuse is something we don't talk about. Why do we not talk about it? Netflix isn't afraid to talk about it. Why are we afraid to talk about it? So, like, these are all really good things, because again, if we don't start having these conversations, then we're really not really not progressing. We're not talking. We're not growing in our understandings. We're hiding, and we're becoming more secluded from one another too. So it's interesting that I think I would argue, I wouldn't argue, I would put forth that we are actually more secluded when we don't have these conversations than when we choose to actually take the time and have them.
Yep.
I think it's about time to wrap up because everybody's saying the video is pausing now. So looks like we don't have a video anymore.
Well, that's all cool. So yeah, very broad this week. Just trying to get an idea of what all we're gonna talk about in the upcoming weeks.
Yep.
Got a lot of good
Check the
stuff
video.
coming. But we're gonna sign off here on the recording. Thank you for tuning in. If you have anything, comment below.